with commodities and actually streamlining the commodities market, which if you listen to the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, is very passionate about markets. And, so it's very interesting to see some of these developments. But onto our discussion today, as I earlier told you, we are on the Biz Chat psych and, sync. And today we are tackling a very big issue. This monster that always, most of the people don't understand it and what it means. And then we go to the nitty-gritties. Of course, we have Victor Otieno from Viva Consult and Professor Tobias Olwenyi from JQuat. Yeah. So, gentlemen, for starters, Victor, I think it's very important for us to sort of set the foundations. Yeah. When you talk about a budget policy statement, what is this document? When does it appear? Why is it important? And why should somebody matter? Why should it matter to somebody rather?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Noah, and good Friday to you. I think just in simple terms, budget policy statement is a document that, of course, is a government document that sets out the agenda in terms of what it wants to do in terms of supporting the economy, how it's going to raise money, and how it's going to support different sectors. Just like in your typical household, you sit down, the father, the mother, and you decide, this month, this is how we want to structure the budget. So before you allocate money, you have to have a plan. So the budget policy statement is basically a plan that is underpinned on PFM Act, Section 25, which is now prepared by National Treasury, and is aligned to the priorities of the current government. For this is the Kenya Kwanza government, and again is linked to Vision 2030, which is our broader vision, then is segregated into medium-term plans. So every time we get a government coming into office, they set the agenda. So the previous government was Big Four agenda. So if you looked at the medium-term plan as well as the different budget policy statement, it was to achieve the agenda that is set by the government in place. So most Kenyans always wait for the June reading of the budget. Even in your house, you can never make a decision if someone says, I'm going to give Noah 10,000 shillings. You have to give it context. So I think for us to be able to understand context, it means that we need to query and ask ourselves, why am I giving Noah 10,000 shillings and for what reason? So the government has set out key priority areas that they are focusing on. Okay. They are saying we want to support SMEs, we want to support housing, healthcare, agriculture, manufacturing. And it is in the budget policy statement that you actually get the real strategy as to how they want to be able to achieve that. This is taken to National Assembly, which would happen on February of 15th of February for approval. So of course it has to go to Cabinet, it is approved, goes to National Assembly, it is queried to see if it actually makes sense. Then we can be able to allocate actual numbers behind it. And it's very important that you query that at this particular time rather than questioning a number. A number doesn't make sense unless you're able to give it context.
All right. That's very important. Prof, gentlemen from the academic background, you always insist there is now the CBC. I'm told, Victor, you're a parent, you're making planes in the evening, you're doing all these interesting things with your child that some of us never did with our parents. Sure. It was homework, go do homework, but go to sleep. So in terms of understanding this process, especially the budget making process, Prof, do you think, because I've seen a lot of interest from Kenyans this period, yeah, post-COVID, that's when everyone is like, what is the government doing with our money? They are taxing us so much. So discourse around public finance is becoming common and common. How critical is it to understand this process?
This is very important because people in the country are the ones who are giving money to the government. So they need to know how the government is using the money that they have given to them. You're talking about the mama mboga, selling mboga, and you're talking about the border, and in one way or another, when they go to the shops, they pay taxes. So people would want to know what is it that their money is doing. Previously, we have had a situation where people are having low education on public finance, especially on the budget making process, but it has been emphasized and re-emphasized, and we have a participatory budget making process where people are encouraged to give their views so that they can actually be able to say what is it that they want their government to do for them. So this is very critical for people so that they can actually air their views in terms of how their money is going to be spent. We realize that in public finance, the government is tasked with the role of ensuring we have infrastructure, we have the education system, we have security, we have health, and the citizen would be in particular questioning how is the government going to divide that money. So it is so important for ordinary mwananchi to know what is called a budget and what is the process in budget making.
Okay, that's very important. So for the 2024 budget policy statement, you said it embodies the government of the day. So the previous government, we had the Big Four agenda, and now this one we have the better agenda. I was waiting to say that because they always say better, but bottom-up economic transformation agenda, right? And this is the description of their vision and how they will articulate that and achieve that vision for the Kenyan people. Now, just going through it, quite a number of priority areas, Victor. We have agricultural transformation and inclusive growth, micro and small and medium-sized enterprises, housing and settlement. We've seen a lot of discussion around housing and settlement, healthcare and digital superhighway. These are some of the areas that have been given, priority. Looking at that, how present is this particular document addressing the current needs of Kenyans, especially through these particular sectors?
The way we analyzed the budget policy statement was based on the degree of contribution towards GDP. And that's why there was a very big focus on SMEs, as well as startups, because innovation is the future. So we want to analyze to see if currently what are the strategies that have been put in place to be able to support SMEs who contribute highly to socio-economic development of the country. And the way we analyzed it is based on the needs of SMEs. So issues around access to finance, issues around policy, as well as issues around market access, because they're very interlinked. And even previous governments have not been able to address these issues comprehensively. Looking at the first issues around access to finance, the current 2024 budget policy statement has laid a huge emphasis on the Hustler Fund as the silver bullet to addressing access to finance to SMEs. If we were to look at data, we see that small businesses are highly informal, number one. Number two is over 70% of SMEs are in wholesale retail. So the danger with trying to address wholesale retail is that it's a sector that is very highly susceptible to systemic shocks. So be it during COVID or elections, because it's a business of buying to sell, and the profits margins are not as good. This kind of intervention becomes a cash flow intervention. So you're not removing this mama mboga from the rat race. They're constantly in the rat race. So then the question is this the best model for addressing access to finance? We already had two interventions, three actually. Biashara Fund, which was a consolidation of all affirmative action funds. The document has not been very clear around the same. We have the Movable Security Properties Act, which was, again, previous government was trying to ask, can Mamboga use the common assets that you have, whether it's a TV or a fridge, to be able to access financing? Of course, if you're to combine, and I think also the credit guarantee scheme. Again, during COVID, there was a lot of movement around the same. Given they haven't performed as well, but is there an evaluation of all these policy or programs, from a government perspective? Then you can tell us that We have reviewed these other actions or programs. They're not working, or we are able to pick lessons here and there.
Okay.
So that has not been very clear, and I do believe that Hustler Fund is a good initiative, but is not the only solution. Around access to market, there's talk around the KIPes, the County Aggregation Industrial Parks.
And even before we go into that, I think it will be nice, Prof, that aspect of access to finance, which this BPS handles and tackles, and offering, Hustler Fund as one of those vehicles to get funds to these micro businesses. So far from your observation, I don't know whether you run a small cricket business, or you might be doing some side hustles, and maybe you look for funds. But Prof, this seems to be the talk over and over again. Micro businesses are too risky to finance in the formal financial and the traditional financial sector. How then can a government intervene? Do you think Hustler Fund has been the right vehicles from your observation?
Right, because of the small micro enterprise, not small enterprise, not small micro enterprise. We have two terms there. There is what you call the SME, and there is the MSME. That is the small micro enterprise. This one is where the capital requirement is very little. So the Hustler Fund can help someone who is doing the small and small micro enterprise, not SME. So when it comes to this, you need little capital to start, maybe 1,000 shillings to start a business of roasting maize somewhere, and you keep on expanding and enlarging your business. But then there is the SME sector, which probably require something expandable. Maybe the Hustler Fund need to scale up so that we are able to have something bigger. Where you need like maybe 50,000, 100,000 to do business. So what we have been seeing more is where we are talking about 1,500. That is what has been known for the Hustler Fund. But we need to expand it, and I believe probably there are plans to expand it so that it can be useful capital for doing business.
Okay.
But it's a step in the right direction. The only thing is that we should not stay there for too long. Yeah, we can stay at 500 and 1,000 for too long and think that we are doing something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a risk, especially when it comes to financing? And are we seeing the private sector coming on board in regards to, pushing for finance for this majority of businesses?
Yes, I think the picture is that private sector had already come in and was giving access to finance outside of financial institutions, because the challenge was getting access. So the fintechs were able to do that, albeit expensively. So the intervention around Hustler Fund was to be able to reduce the cost of credit. But even based on our studies, previous studies, has been that a lot of this funding is doing cash flow financing. It keeps NOAA in the same position and is not able to move outside of sectors such as wholesale. We know that for us to be able to sustain growth and really support SMEs, is we need to move them to sectors around agro-processing, manufacturing, etc. For you to do that, you need long-term financing. So a lot of this short-term financing can support you in terms of buying inventory, an extra tomato, an extra maize, but you still remain poor. So the expansion has to be towards how do we look at other programs, credit guarantee scheme. So you work with bigger players who are able to give you much, big ticket size capital to ensure that you're able to buy an extra, cherehani or an extra something, an asset that can be able to really make you scale. So that's where the challenge is. Yes, we have an intervention. Okay. Yes, it's supporting the majority. but it's not enough. You look at 20,000 chamas have been given, have had access to the Hustler Fund with a disbursement of 151 million. If you are to divide that, that's around 7,500 per group. So even if you are doing a car wash and you are doing 7.5 and you are a group of 20, do you think you'll be able to get enough to run the business as well as something for your own pocket? So that's the argument. It is not that it's a bad initiative. We just need to be able to scale, as Prof is saying, scale it up in terms of how do we use funding. And I think it's very much linked with the market, where we need to aggressively look for markets for our businesses, then link financing in that value chain, so that financing is not just financing, but financing linked to a sustainable market. And we've seen China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and a lot of countries do exactly that.
Definitely. And in fact, access to market is one of the key tenets that you're looking into this BPS.
Exactly.
Is it addressing that?
Yeah, so now, again, what we see is lack of logic to some degree. So the BPS is saying around access to markets, the government is going to build county aggregation industrial parks in every county.
Okay.
And there is also mention of certain value chains, rice value chain, cotton, etc. But there is no mention of a link between aggregation center and this value chain. If, say, for example, we are going to Kisumu, have we identified a value chain, linked it to the aggregation center with very clear mechanism of we are going to access the Dubai market or we are going to access the EAC market? That link is missing. So we are seeing Hustler Fund on one side as an intervention in isolation. We are seeing KIPES, and we have CIDC, they're talking about having industrial park in TVETs. All these are interventions, but they're not reading from the same script.
They're not in sync.
In sync. So what would happen is you'll have a park that is not linked in any way to market. If you go to China, the president would go out, or whichever country, they would go out and go to the US market or Europe and get very specific markets and say this KIPE in Kisumu, in Nairobi, or in Bungoma is going to manufacture for a very specific market. Then you can put capacity building, you can put finance, and by then you will not even need government to put money. Because if you go to a bank and say, look, I'm manufacturing 10 items of a certain whatever, and the market is guaranteed because we have a forward contract with a certain country, the bank will give you because you've completely de-risked.
Exactly.
So for us, that's where we are seeing the missing link around markets.
Yeah, I know. And it's very interesting that sometimes we develop products in isolation, then they become ineffective, whereas we could take time and find a way of interlinkages towards that. So I'm glad we've mentioned the issue of finance, access to markets, which is critical. Policy is also very critical, the policy that we are operating under. I think when we come back after this short break, we shall delve deeper into that. Remember, it's Business Today. This is Biz Chat. We chat about business, and today we are looking at the budget policy statement and how it touches on SMEs and startups. Stay tuned, we'll return with more.